So the Trump administration's peace plan, Robin, what are you thinking about it?
Well, it's a farce. The It's not a peace plan; it's a surrender plan. It annoys me that the British press and the world media continue insist on referring to it as a peace plan. It's just a downloaded copy of Putin's proposals or demands for a Ukrainian surrender, which is even more ridiculous when he struggled for 3.5 years to win a war. He should have won in the first. He claimed he could win in 3 days. So it's a joke. It's a typical Russian negotiating system to demand everything, give absolutely nothing, and hope that you'll get something, no matter how small, in return. It's just pathetic that Trump has latched his demented old mind onto it as well.
It's like almost, it seems like an insurance policy for, 4 years, and then while Russia builds up its army again, with even less Ukrainian soldiers around, more territory there. It doesn't. I don't see any upside for Ukraine apart from maybe 4 years to build up their own forces for round three.
Well, there is no upside. There's no upside at all. The thing about Russian oligarchies and dictatorships is that they don't crumble gently. They collapse in a matter of days. They'll push it right to the very last minute, the last second, the last man, the last body, and then they'll collapse, or somebody will kill them first. They're good at taking out their leaders. They're not good at replacing their governments. And that's likely going to be the end for Putin. And Putin knows this very, very clearly. He has no choice but to go down to the last man and the last ruble. So he has nowhere else to turn now. He's run out of friends. He's running out of money. His national wealth fund, which was at 150 billion US dollars, is now down to less than 30 billion. So he's spent the crown jewels as well. He spent the manpower of his country to gain absolutely nothing. 18% of Ukraine, well, they already had about 17.5% of Ukraine before this war started, just by simply occupying Crimea. So they've lost more than they've actually gained. It's a sad and pathetic situation which could have been resolved faster had it not been for the weakness of not only the Trump government but the Biden government previous to that as well.
So what's the feeling on the ground in the UK about how much British support there is for Ukraine? I mean, I'm in Vienna a lot of the time right now, so you're actually closer to the ground than me in terms of British support.
There's a massive amount of British support, and that continues. There are a lot of Ukrainian organizations in the United Kingdom that are constantly fighting the Russian propaganda funds that are being pushed into corporate media and newspapers here. Um, the any reasonable person sitting back with an objective point of view has got to regard the British corporate media as suspect, because to read them, you would think that Ukraine was on its last legs rather than Russia. You would think that Ukraine is suffering and Ukraine is about to fall, and it's not. In real military terms, Ukraine is actually dominating the war. Its only disadvantage is in mass. The fact that Putin can keep pouring more and more Russian bodies into the firefight, soak up more and more ammunition, and take more and more piles of rubble and small villages. Outside of that, there's not a lot that Ukraine is actually losing apart from the tragic loss of its own people, which is sad and unnecessary. Ukraine is developing, Ukraine is innovating, Ukraine is changing tactics, it's using methods of precision against the mass that's being generated by Russia, and doing it with great success. They're extending their range. The Americans have given permission for ATACMS to go into to hit it targets in Russia. The Russian oil infrastructure is getting destroyed. The refineries are being destroyed. The oil reserves are being destroyed, and now they're hitting the electricity grids as well. The lights are going out in Moscow, and yet the vast majority of the British people aren't hearing about that. They're not hearing about it because somewhere in the system, somebody seems to be putting an awful lot of pressure on the media not to be too pro-Ukrainian, not to be even-handed, so to speak. Well, it's wrong to be even-handed against criminal murderers, and it always will be.
You think that with the cost of living crisis in the UK and the infighting regarding illegal immigration, there's still a stomach for the British taxpayer to keep fighting for Ukraine?
Well, cost of living crisis exists all over the world at the moment. The world economy is on a low, partly because of the war in Ukraine, but also, the threats to Venezuela, the threats in the war that exists in Sudan, the struggle that's going on in Iran, the protests there against the government, the water shortages that are existing there. There's all sorts of issues going on all over the world that affect the economy, not just the Ukraine war. Um, but what's the alternative of not supporting Ukraine? The alternative of not supporting Ukraine is for Russian dominance of what is now the leading military and the most best trained military force in Europe, if not the world. The most effective, the most innovative, the most experienced, the most capable. We're going to give that to Russia and let them turn it around because we haven't supported Ukraine, leaving Ukraine to say, well, we would have won this war if it hadn't been for the blooming Europeans or the Americans not supporting us. And then the next thing that happens is the same problem exists in the Baltic states. The same problem will exist in Romania and in Poland and in Finland. And it keeps grinding forward. You do not achieve anything with appeasement. So anybody that directs something as big as an international war and then tries to refine it down to a cost of living difficulty for the people of the United Kingdom is being deceitful.
What if it's people can't afford to eat, or they're just missing meals, or people just can't afford housing, them threatened of being homeless? Um,
Well, those problems existed when I was a kid,
mhm.
and they will always exist. There will always, sadly, be richer and poorer, even under a socialist system. The fair distribution of wealth and resources doesn't happen, unfortunately, because the greedy are greedy, the wealthy are wealthy, and the rest of us do the best we can. But those situations don't exist specifically now because of a reason that somebody wants to pop up on a poster and say, oh, this is the fault of, because it's not the case. It's always been the case. There will always be people with less and always be people with more. And if people haven't got enough food, well, at least we have things like social security, welfare, and food banks to help support them. And we have housing programs and we have charities and we have all sorts of other systems. We can criticize our government, but at the end of the day, everybody is trying to do what they can for the poor. The best thing you can do for the poor is create new investment and new jobs in the United Kingdom. That's the best thing you can do. And train young people to work for themselves and give them skills and trades rather than expecting them to go out and work in factories in unskilled labor and accept crap wages that they can't live on.
Yeah, I get the feeling that a lot of public companies in the UK are behaving toxic by just trying to extract as much profit out of the economy as possible, outsourcing a lot of developer jobs, and just for short-term profits, whereas their market is the money's moving out of their local market, their economy. So eventually, at some point, their shareholders will suffer because of this toxic behavior. There's no loyalty. There's so much separation between the workers and those majority shareholders making the decisions. That just the majority of public companies just seem toxic to me.
Well, companies exist to make money.
Hmm.
The director's prime role is to make money for the shareholders, and that's why, it's part of their job to lay off workers when the company isn't making money and to employ them when they need more. It's the way corporations and companies work. If we want to have what is loosely termed a fairer society, then we need to base our society on sharing resources more than just simply having companies that make the people at the top rich and hope that it trickles down, because it doesn't trickle down. What the system does is puts the vast majority of the wealth in the hands of a few, and that's no different from the aristocratic system that existed, before the 20th century wars ended it. So it just gets a different name, really. It's sad, but it's true. We get a lot of we've had governments in the past that have done their best. They've introduced the welfare state, the national health system, national insurance, pensions, all sorts of things that didn't exist 70 years ago. So is it bad, or what's it bad in comparison to? Is it bad in comparison to this golden age that everybody imagined existed before? Because it didn't exist before. We have these issues, but again, we're controlled by what we're told, and very few people have got the time and energy to spend days and days or hours and hours researching what's truly going on. So they believe sound bites, they believe nonsense, they believe that all their problems are being created by a small number of people that are sneaking into the country on boats. That's wrong. It's illegal. They should be arrested and sent back. Fine. But that's not the cause of our economic problems. And it's not the cause of a problem with somebody who just chooses that he thinks he's too good to work in McDonald's either. There's all sorts of different types of people. There's sad people that have got unfortunate circumstances, who do everything they can, work 2 jobs a week, and then get hit with increased rents and increased electricity bills. And then there's the other people who sit on their asses and do nothing and play victims all their life. And there are other people that pretend they're sick when they're not sick, can make claims and bleed the system. But they've existed as well. They existed 50 years ago too. So managing people like herding cats, isn't it?
So back to Ukraine.
That's an easy one.
Do you think Putin could use some kind of dirty bomb or nuclear weapons in Ukraine?
No, no, it would. There's no return on it for him. Putin is anything but mad. He's predictable in many ways. He's he's following a pattern that has existed in the Russian government for a long, long time. Push it, push it, push it, push it. Hope for a success, and if not, back off. They did exactly the same in Afghanistan. They lost the war in Afghanistan. They're losing the war in Ukraine. If they were to use any type of nuclear device, even a tactical nuclear device, which still has a big yield, or a dirty bomb, or gas, or biological warfare, or any of those systems, he then isolates himself from every part of the world. He isolates himself from North Korea, from China, from Iran, from the Middle East. There's nobody in the world that would give him any kind of help after that. And he would be condemning his own country to death. So the chances are he'd get himself killed by his own people very, very quickly. It's not going to happen.
We know Putin's not rational because of this war. Didn't make sense at the start. I mean, he's just had flawed intelligence. He believed lies, or he didn't think through this invasion.
It made sense. It made sense at the start. He had this big war chest, 150 billion US dollars in his national wealth fund. He controlled the oil supply to Europe. He had huge customers. He believed that Europe was totally dependent on him for their energy supplies, which in many cases they were. And he didn't think that Europe would stand up and risk that for Ukraine, which was always considered to be a Russian sphere of influence. And he didn't see Ukraine as militarily strong enough to defend against a Russian invasion. Yeah, an invasion. And he thought he would finish it in a couple of weeks. But what he really didn't get the information on and understand clearly was how corrupt and inefficient his own armed forces were. And they failed. They failed to take Ukraine in that first 2 weeks. And I wrote after that first 2 weeks that they'd already lost the war. It was just a matter of time. And Putin realizing that. Had he pulled back to the borders then, he wouldn't have lost a great deal. But he didn't. Once he started, his ego wouldn't let him. He had to push forward. He had to win. and he's still there nearly 4 years later. But it was logical, it was believable. Most of the world's press was turning around and saying, it'll be over. They're going to take it. It's a done deal. Now they were all wrong. Ukraine fought back, and Ukraine had prepared to fight back, and Ukraine had weapons from the West that the Russian intelligence services seemed to be completely unaware of. So if there was a failure in Russia, it was a failure at intelligence levels, but it was also a failure at the military level because nothing worked very well because it was so corrupt. It's also very old-fashioned.
Mhm. So we both think that a nuclear attack on Ukraine is unlikely. However, if we move into fiction territory, and we actually in Europe, they are making some nuclear preparations for defense against or mitigation against nuclear kind of weapons. What would you think it would look like, for example, if Russia nuked a part of Ukraine or they set up some dirty bombs, irradiated a region in terms of refugees and ability of Europe to absorb, say, half the population of Ukraine as refugees?
Well, it's as you so rightly said, it's a fiction. It's a what if. I mean, it doesn't matter what answer I give to a what if.
Mhm.
It's just a guess. Based on realities, I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's going to happen. Um, if that's another issue that you just brought up there, though, if Russia did have any kind of success in Ukraine, then there would be a massive amount of immigration from Ukraine, Ukrainians running away across the Polish, Moldavian, and Finnish borders to try and escape into the West and get away from it. So again, we'd be making an even bigger problem for the West rather than resolving a problem. There are two ways to end this war. One is for Putin to withdraw his forces to the pre-2014 borderlines. That's all he's got to do. He loses nothing by doing that. He's back to where he started. He's lost nothing. And he might even be able to retain power by claiming that he's sorted Ukraine out, dealt with the Nazification, and had a great victory, and now being generous enough to give them back control of their own country and withdraw back to the borders. But we'll be back to sort you out again. That's a possibility. And the other possibility is in a military defeat of Ukraine. And that will come primarily from the Russian economy collapsing. And it's failing. It's failing abysmally. And not a lot of people in the press are paying a great deal of attention to how fragile the Russian economy is becoming. It's not making any money. It's spending its savings, and it's not managed. Its oil now is, I think it's $33, Ural's oil, $33. It can't make a profit on that. It can't ship it out because the shadow fleet's been blocked into. It's getting hit at sea. It's getting blocked into the bay at St. Petersburg, prevented from moving through the Straits of Denmark. And if they can't ship the oil out, and their storage depots are being destroyed, then they've got to stop producing it. And if they stop producing that oil, it's not a case of just turning a tap on again and restarting. It takes a great deal of high technical expertise to restart a mine, an oil well once it's been closed down. They get blocked. They get stuck. It's not an easy thing to do. So they're really having a difficult time, and there's not enough attention being paid to how badly Russia's suffering as a result of the war that they started.
Yeah, if Russia started taking more and more territory, and maybe they were, I don't know, 50 kilometers away from Kiev, we'd probably see a lot more refugees moving to the west. And then if they took Kiev, hopefully, I mean, I reckon a lot of people that I know there would not want to stay in Ukraine if the Russians were coming to take over their territory. Do you think that the borders of Europe, like the EU, would block refugees from Ukraine if there was, say, 20 million trying to get into the EU.
No, I think the massive majority of the leadership of the EU, the European leaders, with the exception of Fico and Orban, would open their borders and welcome those people in. And it would also be a good idea to welcome the Ukrainian army in as well and say, come over here, bring all your kit, and let's start again from this place. That's a long, long way off if it were to happen. But no, I don't think they would. I think the European leadership in general has some very high moral standards, probably the highest in the world. A lot of respect for people like Merz, Macron, the leaders of Finland, the leaders of the Baltic states. They know the Russians. The closer you are to Russia, the better you know them, the better you know how deceitful they are, the better you know how they manipulate the message, how they trade, how they trick. They don't see morality as an issue. They don't see murdering and terrorizing civilians as an issue. They just see it as another method of carrying out warfare. So they understand them. It's sad that we have a large number of journalists or editors or publishers who don't understand the Russian mind and don't understand the mind of purely violent people who will do anything they wish in order to get what they want.
I'm trying to think, like, there must be a process. Some European leaders must be planning for worst case scenario, 20 to 30 million refugees, and how they would cope with that economically in Europe, how they would distribute them around.
Well, I mean, every government has actions on plans. They do test scenarios. They plan for the worst case situations. That's normal procedure for the military, for the government, and so on. But prevention being better than a cure, the best way of preventing that disastrous type of situation is to make sure that Russia loses. That's it. If they lose, you don't have that problem. If we support Ukraine, if we maintain our support for Ukraine, if we understand that we don't need America, and if America's not there, it's lovely to have them, but if they're not there, we can still win it without them, then we move on. And once Russia realizes that we'll carry on without Trump and without US support, then it's another nail in his coffin, not ours.
This recent peace plan by Trump, I can't predict
Not a
Trump
peace
what he's
plan,
doing.
surrender plan, a
Surrender
surrender
plan.
plan.
In one minute, Trump seems like he's pro-Ukraine, then he's like softening up to Russia. It's just like a yo-yo kind of a thing. It's hard
Trump's
to
a Russian
know.
asset. Trump belongs to Putin. Putin has something very, very bad on Trump that he got on him many, many years ago when Trump was in Moscow. You know, Trump has had money from the Russian government to support his companies, to support himself, to support his failing businesses over the years. Why he was never lifted and arrested by the FBI, I don't know. Perhaps he was acting as a double agent or a turned agent, or they just thought he was Putin's useful idiot. He's certainly a useful idiot, but he's a dangerous useful idiot because somebody and a load of idiots have got him in as the president of the United States. But he's owned. Trump can't be, well, he is bloody blatant. It's blatantly obvious that he is controlled and manipulated by Putin. Putin has something so terrible on him that should it be revealed, then, Trump's finished in a matter of days. However, it's like a nuclear bomb. If Putin uses it, once it's used, it's lost forever. It's no longer of any value to him in the war against Ukraine. So I think what he did in Alaska is he essentially said to Trump, listen, you give me Ukraine. If you don't give me Ukraine, I'm going down. And if I go down, I'm taking you with me.
Do we have any clear evidence that he does have something on Trump? Anything that's been
Only
proven
the
in a
evidence that's
court
thrust in our face every single day. Only the evidence that's spread all over the world every single day. Only Trump's actions ever since he came back into power, because since he came back into power, he has done nothing for Ukraine. And he proposed this ridiculous Russian surrender plan over the past week apparently without even reading it. You know, There is a story out there that says it was a Russian plan. They did a Google Translate on it, sent it to Marco Rubio, who also never read it, and sent it to Trump, who approved it. And that's the end of it. That's how useless and incompetent they are, you know? So the evidence is there. You know, when you sit in your bedroom and you know your wife is cooking stew in the kitchen because you can smell it. You can't see it. You don't have any evidence for it, but you can smell it. And the world can smell the stink that comes off Trump every single day.
So, what's the feeling from your US contacts about the American support for Ukraine?
There's a huge amount of, of American support for Ukraine. The Americans, as a population, are a wonderful group of people who believe in freedom and democracy, but they just don't have a government that believes in that at the moment. So there's a huge amount of money that's flooding into Ukrainian support systems from the USA. The Americans in the Democrats keep the pressure on. They keep the legal pressure on so that not too much is done to damage the war in Ukraine. But it's an ongoing, continuous battle against the people that control the military and the government, and it's very, very difficult for them to do. But hopefully, we'll see, all autocracies and all dictators and all leading criminals either get taken out or die in the end, and it'll come to an end. And hopefully, America hasn't isolated itself from the world so much that it can never come back again.
I don't know what's going on with the price of food in America. Like you see people on YouTube talking about like $10 frozen pizzas and like $1 an egg. I mean, how can the food price be so high for America versus, like Europe's maybe half the food price? What's going on
Well,
there?
you've got 98. What's it? 2% of Americans own 98% of the American wealth, and they
2%.
don't care. Yeah, yeah, and so they don't care. It's corporate morality. They don't care about people. They care about profit. They care about power. Um, and so we've got this kind of, the Americans use the word socialism as if it was communism, and it's not the same thing at all. We've got a sort of pseudo socialist state in the United Kingdom, and most European nations are the same, where we share resources, where we try to spread the wealth from the top across people with taxes and with benefits and so on. The Americans don't have that. So it's all for me and none for you. And it's almost like a sultanate, the great kleptocrats and autocrats and oligarchs, that control America are a bit like the old British aristocracy, but with less duty and less concern about the people. The people are just minions that they can cast aside as and when it suits them.
I think that the rich in general, I mean, I know a few rich that are very generous. The rich in general, if they could get away with it, would behave a lot more immoral. But it's the taxes that keep society from basically deteriorating into another French Revolution.
Yeah, I agree. Tax the rich. And if they're super rich, give them super taxes. Because let's put it this way: if you're in a situation like you or I, very ordinary, everyday guys, and somebody we win £10 million on the lottery, we're made for life. Not only are we made for life, our families are made for life as well. We're just rolling. But there are people out there with billions, hundreds of billions. So what difference does 10 million make to them? What difference does another billion make to them? It doesn't change their lifestyle, doesn't do anything. What does it mean? If they open a corporation and they employ a lot more people, well, that's good news. That's wonderful. But what does it actually mean to have another £1 billion, $1 billion? It makes no difference to their life at all. So it's ridiculous and rather vulgar and offensive that anybody should be that wealthy. I've seen guys in London spend £600 on a bottle of wine at lunchtime. People work 48 hours a week to get £600 after tax, and that's how I can't think of the correct words online, but there's something vulgar about the whole situation when one person can buy a bottle of wine for £600, and another person is struggling to buy shoes for their kids who works 48 hours a week. That's not right. And so, we have to find way. We do have ways of sharing our resources, and as artificial intelligence comes in the same way that mechanization came in and computerization came in the past, we're going to find we've got a population with less work available for them. And so the resources and the finances are going to have to change at some point in time to give everybody a standard of living that's acceptable, and enough food and enough energy and enough shelter so that the world can continue. Otherwise, we just end up with a few people with big palaces and everyone else living in hovels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the enclosure movement in the UK was designed to help organise crop harvesting, make it more efficient. Although some people would argue that the communal ownership of the land in the UK was being managed relatively well. I mean, I have to research that. But there does seem like, due to the enclosure movement, a lot of the land in the UK is unfairly distributed, and it should somehow be redistributed to the British citizens somehow.
It's not so much who owns the land. I mean, you can own a house, you can own street houses. Um, it's the money, it's the profit, it's the benefits of the land that need to be distributed. So, you set up a corporation, you work very, very hard, you take the responsibility, you put the money in, you expect a return on that. But so does everybody else as well. And that's what taxes are supposed to do. They're supposed to redistribute some of the wealth that you've created, but you do deserve to be rewarded for your hard work as well. Um, you can't play the old 1950s Chinese game of we're all equal, wear the same clothes, and get exactly the same money, because it didn't work there. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. So we've got to find a way of maintaining that people who do the work and people with the expertise and study for a long time to get qualifications are rewarded, but not to the point where they own 98% of a nation's wealth.
I think it's very dangerous right now because we basically have a new industrial revolution, but but the social contract was broken in a sense. All these people moved to cities for intellectual jobs, manufacturing jobs. The manufacturing jobs have left, and now the intellectual jobs are leaving. Until for exception of a few people that are overseeing the outsourcing to AI. So we're at a point where the governments are a deer in the headlights, not knowing how to deal with like half the population in cities being unemployed, and you have all the doctors and lawyers, all these people around them that are not reducing their prices. They don't care. They don't care. Like, they've got a bunch of society that doesn't care that half of the society in the city is losing their jobs. They want the same lifestyle, and it's going to lead to big problems.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the Welsh Valleys, and some of the best off people in the valleys up here are the tradesmen, because it doesn't matter how wealthy you are as a doctor or a lawyer, you need somebody to put a new kitchen in for you. You need somebody to plaster your walls or build that extension or put some new plumbing or repair your drains. It's the tradesmen that come along, and they're in short supply. They're really a high quality product, earning extraordinarily good money. So why aren't we spending a lot more time giving vocational skills to non-academic young people who don't want to be forced to stay in school until they're 18, being taught something that they have absolutely no interest in at all? We're not all academics. Some of us can turn a piece of wood into a dolphin or into a chair. That's a genius system of its own. You don't have to have mathematics to do that. Some people can create a painting. Some of the world's greatest successes, like Alan Sugar. Alan Sugar was a barrow boy, in East London. So there's got to be vocational directions as well, vocational skills available for people. This idea that everybody has to go to school and achieve 6 GCSEs in order to get a job in Tesco is ridiculous. What we need systems which are training kids to do things that their particular skill set is best for. We have schools of academic excellence for athletes, for footballers. Where, oh, you're the best footballer, we're going to stick you in here, give you a scholarship, and we're going to make sure you're a famous footballer and give you lots of money. Fantastic. But the second we start doing that academically, everyone's saying, oh, there's something seriously wrong about this, and it's a class system thing, and it's not fair. Well, if you've got smart kids, we used to stick them in grammar schools. And that didn't mean that comprehensive schools and secondary modern schools were bad. It just meant that they had a different direction. We were taking these kids, just like the sports athletes, and saying, you're going to be the ones that have got the best chance of going to university. Doesn't mean you're necessarily better than these other people. It just means that that is what you're most suitable for. You're most suitable to be a doctor, a scientist, a lawyer. You, on the other hand, over here, you may actually earn a hell of a lot more money than him because you'll end up running a plumbing company, and good for you too. And you'll be the millionaire long before they are. So it's, people play games with that kind of nonsense, but it's opportunity for young people that's missing in our country. When I joined the army at the age of 15, that was an opportunity. We had army apprentice colleges. We had army trades colleges. We had technician colleges for people aged 15 who had just left school. 13,000 of them in 1972. And they became the teachers, the instructors, the tradesmen, the skilled operators of the future. My own brother joined at 16 and spent 22 years with the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers. And he now he's a health and safety operative for high-rise buildings. Big money. So opportunity. If we want to sort out things, we sort them out at the beginning. We sort them out at the grassroots levels and give kids opportunities. There we are. That's Robin. That's the world according to Robin.
Well, that's I think I've got everything I need for today, but we need to do another podcast on economics. We need to come up with an economic plan for the UK, with everything
Well, I'll
that's
tell
going
you,
on.
this is a plug, but people should listen to Joe Blogs on YouTube. He's an economist. He follows Russia a lot, but not only Russia, and he keeps a very close eye on their economy. And if you want to know what's going on in Russia and how badly they're doing, follow Joe Blogs on YouTube. Well worth a look.
All right. Okay, Robin, I really appreciate your time and look forward to catching up soon. Appreciate it.
Okay, robinhorsfall.com. Go there.
Get his book. Brilliant, mate.